Alrighty then. Okay, what we're going to talk about today is the upcoming midterm. I realize there's a lot of information. There's 9 chapters we got to deal with. It's going to be an online test, which some of you may be used to, some of you may be new. Anyway, I think it'll do well to go through and kind of focus your study. Also, there's thousands of questions to choose from and make, and I tried to choose them that would choose questions that would focus your study on the stuff that's most relevant. So anyway, we'll go through. I've got the actual test right here, 41 questions, and we'll go through and we'll talk a little bit about the areas that will be covered and some of the ground rules. First off, before you sit down to take the test, make sure you have a calculator. It's going to be a time test. You're going to have 60 minutes, and it will just close on you at the end of that 60 minutes. So you want to be kind of organized and make sure you got 60 minutes available and a decent internet connection and all the rest of that. If things go horribly wrong, it's not unrecoverable. You get a hold of me somehow, email, phone call, whatever. I reset you in the computer and you retake it again. Now, if it takes you 2 or 3 times to do that, then it's sort of like, what's going on here? But for most people, no, it's understandable. Other things that will cause problems are opening up other browsers. So I don't know whether this is by design on the system or what, but if you were to say try and Google answers or things like that, you're likely going to crash the system and it'll just close on you. And that's about it. 41 questions, like I said. So it's all going to be a true, false, multiple choice, and it's going to be in the test section. So for those of you who've done the practice test, it'll be just like those 3 questions in there. For those of you who haven't, you can go ahead and give that practice a go. It's not too difficult, and you shouldn't have any problems with the mechanics of it. So we're going to cover all 9 chapters, and I'll just start right in. There will be a question relating to inflation. Okay, so what does inflation do? $100 today versus $100 10 years from now. It's still $100, but what can you do with it? What can you buy with it? And that's, really that's the only thing money is good for is what you can buy with it. So inflation has an effect on the buying power of that $100. That's critical. Couple basic economics types of questions that were covered also in that chapter. What happens? What affects prices? There's a number of things that will cause prices to go up or down, and a lot of it has to do with supply and demand. Again, that's basic economics, but it does have a play here. If the housing market is very tight, prices are going to go up. Interest rates, if interest rates are very low, a lot of times that'll stimulate demand because more people can get money, and it's more advantageous to buy, so there's going to be more people in the market, so that there's going to be more demand. So a couple questions like that. The other thing too, and I don't know if you've been watching the stock market the past couple days, but again, today, this is I'm doing this on what is this, Thursday? The market's way up. Is that because companies are incredibly healthy? No. Is it because the government, everybody likes this chaos? No. It's because the lady who's been selected to be in charge of the Fed, the Federal Reserve Bank, is going to keep pumping money into the system, which is artificially going to pump it up. So anyway, if you're going to do the stock market, you certainly need to be aware of the effect of some of these government agencies and who they are and who the players are. So when people talk about the Fed, what they're talking about is the Federal Reserve System, and they're the people who are, they're a governmental, pseudo-governmental agency, but they definitely have, in this case, a pretty strong tie with whoever is running the show at that point, since obviously the president chose the person this time. So anyway, it's a little more complex. They would consider themselves pseudo-private, but for most purposes, it's governmental control. institution. Um, Let me see. When you're looking at moving on to like savings, banking type issues, um, obviously you want the highest interest rate possible. Well, how do you get a higher interest rate? There's different things. Most of the time it involves more risk, or if you're looking at it from the bank's perspective, they're interested in using, they're interested in making loans on the money that you would deposit. So they will often give you a higher interest rate if you agree to keep that money within their bank for a certain length of time. So what's that do for you? Let's say you put 10,000 in some CD type thing, certificate of deposit, with a certain 1 year type thing. You're going to get a higher interest rate because you've given up liquidity. You cannot just go grab that money without paying a penalty. You could withdraw that money, but they're going to make that extremely painful because you made an agreement to keep it in there to get a higher interest rate. So there's all sorts of trade-offs on there. Also, by doing that commitment, if interest rates go up in another investment, you can't just pull your money out. So there's a lot of reasons why a bank would like to have you make a commitment to keep your money in there, but the risk you'd be facing is in terms of liquidity. Anytime you're making investment choices, say you do a CD, invest in real estate, when you make a choice to invest in something, you obviously making a choice to not invest in another item, and that's called opportunity. So opportunity cost is when you elect to go out to lunch every day and buy a coffee every morning, say you're spending $20 on that kind of stuff every day. Well, at the end of the month, that's basically $600 that you don't have for other investments. So anyway, that's the whole notion of opportunity cost. One investment means that another investment cannot be made. We did talk about in the chapters in the subject here about career choices and where the emerging fields are and what's going to be going on. Technology does play a role in that. Technology can either help you out or it can kill you. And in terms of, like, let's say manufacturing, for example, any manufacturing that's going to remain in the U.S. in terms of old assembly line stuff, it's going to usually be more of an automated process now. So going to be fewer jobs, but they're going to be probably higher paying jobs because it's not going to be the person doing the menial labor. It's going to be the person programming the machines to do it. So anyway, technology definitely has a role to play on what's going on in a given field. If you wanted to be a bank teller, for some reason that was your aspiration, probably not a good idea, seeing as ATMs and the power of online banking has made a lot of those processes not required. In terms of employee benefits, you're going to have a bunch of different benefits that are available to you. The old system of you work for the company, you get the 30-year whatever pension, you get some sort of pension that's implied, and everybody gets sort of a one-size-fits-all. A lot of that's gone by the wayside. And when they talk about people being able to pick individual benefits, that's referred to as a cafeteria style plan, where you can go in and you can say, yeah, I'll have the the whatever life insurance and this medical policy and this investment scheme, and you tailor things for your particular needs. That's cafeteria style type things. Also, when we're talking any of these employment things, there's going to be compensation packages. That's what we would typically call pay. But when they say compensation, they're talking the whole picture. And different benefits will have different pay schemes. Like, let's say if you're getting pay, when you say pay, that typically means a benefit that's going to be completely taxable, whereas something is pay that's tax deferred. Well, that means you're still going to pay taxes on it, but you're going to try and pay it sometime in the future, like say when you're retired and you don't have a steady income and you're in a much lower bracket. And then there's also tax exempt. Tax exempt is even better. This means that there are no taxes paid on it. And those usually, rather than say those are pays, they usually refer to those as allowances. So let's say you're going to be working overseas and they're going to give you a housing allowance. Well, that's a good thing because that allowance will not enter into the tax scheme. So you do have to be careful on this. I saw a guy get burned on this pretty badly. He was overseas and he was a private contractor, and he wanted to send his kids to American schools, which were Department of Defense schools. Well, unless you're a service member or a government employee, you want to put your kids in those schools, you have to pay. So this guy had 5 kids, $26,000. Believe me, it's not worth it, but that's what the Department of Defense charges per child. So the company said, well, fair enough. We're going to give you basically $125,000 extra pay to put your kids through the private schools, just the Department of Defense schools, which he thought was a good deal until at the end of the year. Now all of a sudden his pay is, pretty stratospheric, and he gets clobbered on taxes. So he's in a, say, a 28% tax bracket. He doesn't get all that $125,000 that was allotted to him for schools. He has to pay taxes on that and is down, below $100,000 when you had out-of-pocket expenses. So anyway, keep in mind when you're looking at compensation from whatever firm, whatever organization you go to work for, you want to know not only the dollar figure that's involved, but you want to know tax deferred, tax exempt, and just regular pay, because there's calculations that can be done to figure out, so you're comparing apples to apples and not tax exempt to say regular pay type issues. Let me see. Yeah, skills that, abilities, problem solving skills, physical dexterity. Yeah, not much on that. We're just going to basically aptitude type questions. There are going to be some questions on figuring in benefits. Say you're in a certain tax scheme. Say you're, in this case, you're getting a $1,000 benefit that's tax exempt. What would that equate to in real dollars in terms of if that was a pay? And it's going to be quite a bit more. So in that case, if it's a 28%, if you're in a 28% tax bracket, marginal tax bracket, you would basically go 1 minus that 28, which would be 0.72, and then you would divide that into that amount. So in this case, 0.72 into 1,000 is going to go what? Say 1250. I'm just doing it off the top of my head. You're going to have to use a calculator on the test, but you can see that a tax exempt benefit is worth more if you convert that back to a pay figure. So anyway, you'll need to know how to do that. I've talked about tax deferred. I've talked about tax exempt. Again, tax deferred does not mean that you're skipping out on the taxes. It just means that you're deferring them, just like it says. Enough on that. Some more calculations regarding tax brackets and again how to do those calculations to compare a taxable benefit to a pay figure. We know what fixed expenses are versus variable expenses. So you would have to do calculations, not necessarily calculations, but you'd have to at least put things in quantifiable parts. Characteristics of Americans in terms of their savings. What do Americans do well? Are Americans really proactive savers? Maybe at a point in time, but that has changed. So most people are actually fairly ill prepared. When they talk about having an emergency fund, most folks are not in the position they want to be. And a lot of times, whatever, people are living paycheck to paycheck, and the economy's not great. But a lot of that also has to do with what we talked about before in terms of opportunity cost. You can set yourself up by changing the program a little bit in terms of what you're saving. And again, it's one of those things. You start small. You don't have to put away much, but if you take it out of your paycheck before, just consider it a bill. Get that out of your paycheck and consider that money already spent, then it's far easier to save rather than, we'll save whatever's left at the end of the month. If you use that kind of theory, typically, human nature, there's nothing left at the end of the month. Yep. Again, a little bit more, taxes are kind of a critical element on this thing. So when you talk about reducing taxable income, what would reduce taxable income? And obviously, if it says income, earned income, passive income, whatever, those are going to increase income. You're looking for something else. You're looking for credits, exclusions, things like that. Expenses taxpayer allowed to deduct from gross income. You'll need to know questions like that and more stuff about taxes. We're familiar with the concept of capital gains. Again, remember, like capital gains, like in real estate, can be quite good in terms of the allowance. If you live in a house more than 2 out of the past 5 years, you can keep literally tax-free $250,000. If there's a couple, you keep $500,000. So you'll see people with investment property in some nasty neighborhood, and they're like, well, guess what? We got to go move into that house for a couple of years because they want to get that capital gain. So think about that when you're buying a rental property. If you're going to end up trying to move in it if it appreciates greatly. I've had friends who've had to do that. They never considered living in that rental property, but at the end they decided to suck it up. And the IRS will check on you if you try to pretend like you're living there and you're really living someplace else. That would be considered tax evasion. It's all fun and games when you're deferring taxes, but when you're evading taxes, that's big rocks, little rocks kind of stuff. Talked about liquidity and savings. We talked about opportunity costs. Again, a lot of times there's no free lunch. There is no free lunch. If you've got a checking account that requires some high minimum balance, of which they don't pay interest on, well, that's an opportunity cost. If you've got, say, $1,000 minimum balance that you need to keep in that account, you're probably better off paying a small fee for a more traditional checking account than an interest-bearing checking account. Know how to do tax. If you're making a certain income, let's say you're making 10% on some investment, but you're in a 28% tax bracket. What is your actual true interest rate after taxes? Because a lot of times, it seems like it's a great deal to, making 10% interest, but if it is going to be taxable interest unless it's in some sort of, municipal tax-exempt type bond. So again, to make a comparison between those two investments, you need to look at that interest rate that you're earning, calculate the tax effect, and then come up with a real interest rate. So again, a 10% yield is probably actually going to end up being down around 7-8 when you calculate the tax effect on it. Again, you'll have to get more accurate answers by using your calculator. Open-ended credit, closed-ended credit. You know what we're talking about there in terms of, a house is closed-end credit. You don't have a revolving balance on your mortgage. They want a fixed amount, and at the end of 30 years, typically, you're done. It's not like a credit card. A credit card is open-ended credit. You put money on, you put a little in. It's a, like a line of credit type thing. it's an open credit situation. Typically, too, if you want to use credit cards, and like I say, I wouldn't necessarily shy away from credit cards because they can be pretty useful in terms of maybe allowing you to keep a little less, cash on hand in a, interest account that's probably not earning maximum interest. But if you are going to use credit cards, you want to pay them off, each month down to zero, or else if you keep just a little bit in there, a lot of times they can, in the fine print, they can charge you interest for your average balance. But if it's at zero, most agreements, there is no interest charge. So, we know debit cards, the difference between debit card and check card. The simple way, most of us are familiar with debit cards. It's just like writing a check, but in most cases a little bit easier. And but there is no float. There's, you can, if you've got your smartphone with you, you can ring up some gas and you can literally see that money coming out of your account, typically instantaneously. So keep that in mind. Co-signing for loans, it's the friendly thing to do and all that, but you are on the hook. That is your loan, and basically, if you're co-signing the loan, it probably means that the person, has some sort of credit issues. So if you're the banker and you've got a loan that's going bad, are you going to even waste your time going after the guy with a, kind of marginal slimy credit? No, you're going to go after the person who co-signed it because they've got money. So, outside of family, I wouldn't be co-signing too many loans. But anyway, that's a personal issue for you. But from a legal standpoint, you are on the hook 100% for that. The credit bureaus, credit agencies, if you get turned down, definitely, ask for a credit report. That's one of the occasions where you get one for free. You can also get them for free. I believe it's twice a year. But anyway, you can apply to those bureaus and don't go through the whatever .com, free credit report kind of people, because that usually will just generate a lot more junk mail than you care to have. What you want to do is you want to deal with those people directly, and that's going to work for you. Again, on loans, the concept of collateral. A bank, if you go to a bank and you say, I want to borrow $10,000, it's going to be a fairly high interest rate if it's just a personal loan, just unsecured. But if you say, I want to, get a $10,000 loan, but I'm going to borrow against my house, I'm going to do a home equity loan, well, then the interest rate's going to be lower because they know that they've got some security there, they've got collateral. So the interest rate will be lower, and then also the tax benefits, since it's against your home, mortgage interest deductions are allowed. So anyway, a lot of factors go into the interest rate that you will get. Automobile loans are collateralized. That's why auto loans, at least from most reputable dealers, are fairly attractive interest rates because they can come after that car and they don't have to. There's not a lot of formalities involved. You don't pay the bill, they come take the car. So all this notification business and the rest of that, a lot of that is per the laws and per the agreements you sign. It definitely favors the person selling the car. They can just come take as they will. Speaking of bad credit type situations, bankruptcy. Two kinds of bankruptcy, that we talked about primarily. Chapter 7 is what they just call straight bankruptcy. That's like, sell all my assets and, I'll start over. Pretty severe. Any bankruptcy is severe, but you do have Chapter 13, which is maybe a little bit, well, it is better if you're going to have to go that route. And this is somebody who's not, completely destitute. You're a wage earner, and they're going to come up with a plan. You're going to be under the guidance of a judge. I mean, you're giving up some freedom and liberty here, but you're getting relieved of much of your debt. But Chapter 13 is what they call a wage earner plan with regular type payments. So, anyways, as opposed to chapter 7, which is, you have to go before the judge. This is what I own. This is what I owe, and he starts basically taking. There's certain things too that don't get rid of in bankruptcy. So, obviously, in most marital situations, when there's a divorce, people would go straight to bankruptcy if they could get out of alimony, child support, and not so fast. Plus, when you owe the government money, like in student loans, those will not be waived either. So keep that in mind. We talked a little bit about court systems, some of the consumer stuff. What's the purpose of small claims court? That is, when you go in there, there's no lawyers involved. It's just you and the other party. Now, the advantage of small claims court is it's meant to keep the costs lower. But again, you don't want to threaten to go to small claims court. You don't want to just jump straight to small claims court, because all this will come up in small claims court. They'll say, what steps have you taken? And if you didn't go through, a pretty lengthy notification and trying to settle this thing on your own, it's going to look very unfavorable towards your cause. So again, it's a good way to resolve issues, but the likelihood is you probably won't get to small claims court. You'll probably go through the procedures to try and get the person to pay, the company to pay, whatever. And through those steps, things will probably resolve themselves, but you don't necessarily say, I'm going to take you to small claims court, because then it makes it look like that's what you want to do, and the court will frown upon that. They want you to get it taken care of outside of the court if all possible. Service contracts and stuff like that. I know it from the real estate side, and believe me, not a huge proponent, both from reading the contracts and also trying to enforce them. We had a pump go out, and the list of exclusions for this was a well pump, rust, electrical problems, mechanical. But basically, any way this pump could fail was not going to be covered. And then when it was covered, it was about $600 was what they paid out of a $22,000 some bill. So, as most good real estate people did, I kind of sold them, but because people think they're getting peace of mind, but read the fine print. And in fact, even the book does support this, that they're usually not worth it, very expensive. Pardon me. Okay, so other court issues we talked about before in terms of small claims court or regular court. A lot of contracts you will sign will have you agree to mediation or arbitration. Okay, again, this is a mechanism to keep you out of court, to get the differences resolved before it actually gets to court. Mediation, I'm not a big proponent. Usually you have to go to mediation to say you went to mediation, because the court will ask, did you try and mediate this? Mediation is non-binding, so the only difference between mediation and you and the other guy just trying to settle this dispute is that you've got this third party, could be a judge kind of on his off time, or a lawyer or whatever, or just a trained mediator. But if you guys don't agree, the mediator, in my mind, a lot of times can't do a whole lot for you. But if you go to court and you say, oh, well, he refused to mediate, now you're looking like the bad guy. So that will happen. Now, the difference between mediation and arbitration is kind of the same thing. Again, it's not in a courtroom setting, but arbitration is binding. Okay, so the difference between, it's quite significant. The fact that when the arbitrator comes up with a decision, you are stuck with it. If you agree to do arbitration, either by contract or by agreement, you got to live with the results. We did talk others about lawsuits, different types of lawsuits, class action lawsuits. It's exactly what it sounds like, a class. Okay, so say you and 1,000 other people each got ripped off by some company for $100. Well, typically you aren't going to go to court for $100. But if there's, say, thousands or tens of thousands, there's going to be some lawyer out there somewhere who's going to go, hey, wait a minute, this sounds like there's a class, and he's going to try and put you together with a bunch of people who are also wrong, and you're going to fight it together. Okay, so many of you may have already gotten, an email, a letter from somebody saying, hey, you may be part of this class. Do you want to opt in? And now if you opt in, you can't fight this thing later, individually. You've given up your rights. And again, I'm not a lawyer, but basically you've joined this class. So very popular with the lawyers, though, because if there's, a million folks in a class, and then they get one huge settlement, it can make some money for them. And the housing issues, different types of things. Cooperatives are not that prevalent. Condominiums are. Condominiums, again, not a big fan of condominiums. I don't like the rental aspects of condominiums, especially here in Alaska. Whereas if there's a certain number, they may only allow a certain number of the condominium tenants or condominium owners to have tenants. So, I own this property, but yet I can't rent it. That's from a real estate perspective. That's why a condominium for me would be a non-starter. Also, I don't like the whole pseudo apartment lifestyle. But anyway, in a condominium, you own basically from the paint inside. You don't own the grounds. You don't own the roof. You own just within your little area. And so there's going to be some other fees involved, but that's how condominiums are set up. And then some of the other aspects of traditional home ownership, you have different fees that are paid. Again, buyer and seller fees, everything's negotiable, including real estate commissions. But again, in most cases, I would go with an agent. But concept of earnest money, typically that is just an amount of money when you put in an offer. Typically, you put in earnest money to show that you aren't just talking, or you've actually got some money to stand behind it. Anyway, so like I say, about 41 questions on the test. If you have problems, contact me. I don't anticipate big problems though. The systems should work pretty well, but like I say, be in an environment that you're ready to go and you can do the test all in one sitting, and battery charged, everything ready to go. All right, good luck, and send me an email or whatever if you have any problems. Thanks.